One of the other problems with this mix has been that I wasn't really careful in getting it organized before I started to mix it. And I feel like a big part of getting a project organized for a mix, and a master for that matter, is to pack similar tracks into their own folders and route each of those instrument types into their own audio group channels. So here I've color-coded things, which is a really great way to go. It makes it really easy to find things in the mix. All the drums are yellow, so I'm going to click the first drum track. Then I'm going to hold down the Shift key and select the last drum track so that they're all highlighted. Then I can right or control click on any of those tracks and choose Move Selected Tracks to New Folder. So now it's packed those into a folder track. I'm going to call that folder Drums, and I'm going to close up the folder, and I'm going to give it a different color so that that folder track itself is also yellow. That helps me identify it visually very quickly. And I'm going to do the same thing with the bass and the synths and the guitars and all of that, but I'm going to fast forward here so that you don't have to wait for me to do all of that. And now I can see things a lot more easily. I don't have to scroll up and down to get an overview of all of those individual components. And if I want to get to those individual tracks, it's just a matter of opening the folder. Then I can see them and closing it so that I can work on other tracks. Then I'm going to go to the mix console by typing F3, and I'm going to scroll all the way over here, and I'm going to go to the drum audio channel. So not these MIDI tracks right here. I'm going to go to the channels themselves. So here's the kit mix, along with the separate kick, snare, hi-hat, and tom-tom outputs. So I'll click that first one and then shift click the next one. Then I'm going to right or control click on any of those selected channels, and I'm going to scroll up here with my mouse wheel and choose Add Group Channel to Selected Channels. And so the configuration of a group channel is almost always going to be stereo. I don't remember the last time I made a mono group channel. So I'll set that to stereo, or if you're using a different audio configuration, you could choose a surround sound configuration, for example. But this is 2.0, so I'm going to choose stereo. The audio outputs that it's going to feed into is the stereo output. The folder setup, I'm going to choose to create this group channel outside of the folder so that it won't be right next to these selected channels. Instead, it will be all the way down on the far right-hand side of the mix console. And then I'm going to give it the name of Drums. And I'm just going to create one, and I'll click Add Track. And you'll see what happens is the mix console shifts down, and now I can see that drum channel, and it's a group channel. All of the audio from those selected channels is feeding into this drum group so that we can now adjust them individually, or we can add effects or EQ to all of those channels all at once. So if we look at the routing of any of those channels by looking at the routing rack right here, you can see that all of those channels have been rerouted from the stereo output and are now going to the drum group. And the drum group itself is going into the stereo output. And so I'll just fast forward through that process. Now that I have all those group channels added, and I may add some more later, but I've got the 5 basic ones: drums, bass, synths, theremin, and guitars. And if I wanted to, I could give them all the same colors that I'm used to. So that one's going to be yellow, this one's going to be red, the synths are going to be purple, the theremin is going to be kind of that orange color, the guitars are going to be green, and then the stereo output channel is what all of those group channels feed into. Remember that I turned down the master fader here? What I'm going to do is hold down the Control or Command key and double click that fader to put it back at its 0 position. But then I'm going to take all of the group channels, so I'm going to select the first one here, and then I'm going to shift click the last one so that all of those are highlighted. I'm going to hold down the Shift key as well as Alt or Option, and that will quick link all of them together, and I'm just going to turn them all down 12 dB, about 12 dB, because what that'll do is it will make it so that these group channels don't force feed the output of the stereo output fader, because that's a very common thing to have happen. If you set them all at 0 dB, it's really easy to lose control of the output level of the stereo output, and it'll just go into clipping almost immediately. That's why I like to turn those down to a more manageable level. Gives me room to move up and down if I want to with all of those groups of instrumentation. Then I'm going to close the mix console, and I'm going to give this a new revision number. So I'm going to save this as Good old version number 19. That's a little embarrassing to get that many mixes, but darn it, I'm gonna get this song mixed to where I like it and it sounds good for everybody. So I'll save that project, and next let's talk about how many mix consoles you can use when you're mixing.